Good evening, everybody. This is Professor Mani welcoming you to yet another edition of our very popular Wednesday Wisdom webinar. As most of us who've been attending these webinars realize, time flies and it's almost been 6 months plus since we get together every evening on a Wednesday to gain some wisdom from a cross section of people who are happy to share their knowledge, experiences, and wisdom. Today we have with us a very dashing, dynamic doctor whom otherwise one would have thought was perhaps a supermodel or a person from the industry which we call the entertainment industry. Dr. Prasad Raj Dandekar, of course, is a leading oncologist, and he is the head of the Department of Oncology at Harkishan Das Hospital, which is one of the landmark hospitals in Mumbai, almost over 50 years. A fine gentleman, he was ever ready to be part of our Wednesday Wisdom webinar to speak on the topic, how to win the war with cancer. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge my colleague, Shripad Ranade, who made this very easy for us by introducing us to Prasad, whom he knows very well for a couple of years. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Dandekar. May I request Dr. Prasad Raj Dandekar to come onto our screen, and a warm welcome to you from the Bombay Management Association. We have about 50 participants already, and we always believe in the good habit of starting on time and closing on time. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Dandekar. And may I request Shripad to do the honors on our behalf to please introduce him and his august achievements of his career to our audience this evening. Over to you, Shripad.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Very pleasant task for me to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Prasad Dandekar, as Professor Mani mentioned, is currently the head of radiation oncology at Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital and Research Center in South Mumbai. But he's a man of many parts. So while he did his MD and DNP in radiation oncology from Tata Memorial Hospital and followed it up with a fellowship in head and neck cancers at the Royal Marsden Trust NHS Hospital, which is a leading cancer center in London. He has also done an executive postgraduate diploma in hospital administration from TISS. He's a certified counselor. He's certifying to become a coach. And he also runs a couple of social initiatives in whatever is his spare time. So we are very happy on behalf of Bombay Management Association to have such an august speaker here today. Dr. Prasad has mentioned that rather than telling us only about cancer, because we can find out about cancer otherwise, what he's going to address today is he's going to speak about the human side of cancer. He's not going to speak so much about the disease, though we are welcome to ask him questions about that later. He will largely be focusing on the person, whether it is the patient itself or whether it is relatives. So that is the side that he's going to really look at more today with us. So I hand it over to Dr. Prasad and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Shripad, and thank you, BMA, and especially Professor Mani for taking your time and running these wonderful initiatives for the greater good. And as a voluntary organization, I really appreciate the sort of efforts that all of you, the entire team of BMA, puts into this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll give a little bit of background about why am I here. So first of all, you know, when I was growing up, cancer was a rare disease. It happened to somebody. And now we are in a situation, unfortunately, where every person has a family member who has cancer or an extended family member who has cancer. So the incidence of cancer is increasing very rapidly in India. And there are various reasons for that, and we could go into the depths of it a bit later. As Shripad mentioned, what we will do is we will split this presentation into two parts. And the reason why I want to do this is because when you talk about a battle and when you think of cancer, you know, the word battle is, you know, something that comes up quite often. Every battle has two opposing parties in it. And the most of the focus about the battle against cancer is on cancer. How did cancer happen? Why did it happen? Where did it happen? What can we do to cure cancer? What can we, everything is about cancer. Nobody focuses on what's happening to the patient, what's happening to his family, what's happening to his caregivers. So to win a battle, you of course need to know your opponent, but also you need to know about your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and what can you do to increase your strengths, to improve upon what you can do for this battle. So that's what we are going to talk about today in the slides that I'm going to share for first 20-25 minutes. After that, we'll open up for Q&A, where you're most welcome to ask me all the questions about cancer that you may have. And at the end, I'll share certain resources with Professor Mani, and he will email it to participants who have registered. And you can go through them, quite rich resources on information about cancer. Okay, so I'll start sharing my presentation. Just give me a second. Yeah. So it's a battle, and it's a battle that we want to win. And it's a battle which can be quite problematic, traumatic, difficult for many people to win. So first, appreciating that it's a battle and it's a difficult journey is the first step towards doing something about it. Now, when you think of cancer patients, you think of, oh, you need to get, he gets detected and then he gets treated and that's about it. But there is a lot more happening in the lives of these cancer patients. And we need to appreciate and understand, acknowledge that in order to then work on those aspects of life. So we'll go through each of them one by one. So the first battle starts with when the diagnosis happens and the medical advice part comes up. So first of all, where do you get diagnosed? What sort of treatments are required? What are the options that the patient has? Should he go for surgery? Should he go for radiation? What sort of specialist doctors you should be meeting? Where do you go for treatment? Do you need to take second opinion? Do you not need to take second opinion? And you may also get conflicting opinions. And this step is very, very stressful because the person has just been diagnosed with cancer. And then you suddenly don't know what to do, where to go for treatment, what treatment to take. In this, my suggestion is that, first of all, the patient and the family needs to take a deep breath in and just hold on. Not take any rush decision. Don't start any treatments unless, of course, it's a medical emergency. But don't start any treatments just with one opinion. It's always a good idea to take second opinions. It's always a good idea to go to centers of excellence. And the centers of excellence are the hospitals which have wide experience as well as have a holistic team. And we'll talk about the team at the end of it. That it's not one doctor treating cancer. It's a large team that treats cancer patients. So it's not a good idea that you go to a clinic or you go to, an individual to get treated. It always needs to be treated with a larger team. So that's an important aspect of doing this. If you do get conflicting opinions, there is always a good idea to research on your own. And I'll send you some really good resources, which are standard resources where you can get more information about them. But the key message that I want to drive is don't rush, don't take, don't start the treatment right away. And if, your friend or family member has been detected with cancer recently, then, give this advice to them that, take second opinions and just sort of take a breath in, understand what the diagnosis is, and then start the treatment. Once the treatment starts, or even before the treatment starts, there are many physical challenges. Certain cancers may bring upon disability. Say, for example, somebody has a brain tumor, which may cause paralysis. Somebody has a cancer of the tongue, which may cause the person to not be able to speak or eat. Or there could be, like, suppose somebody has a tumor in the leg, the person may not be able to walk. So there's a disability that may come. There may be disfigurement, especially patients who undergo treatments for cancers of the oral, the mouth and larynx. There may be disfigurement. The person may look very different. There could be body image issues such as women who have breast cancers and then undergo removal of the breast. It can cause a significant body image issue. They may find it very difficult to deal with that. They may find it very difficult to even stand in front of the Mirror. I had one patient who actually got rid of all the mirrors in her house because she said, I just cannot stand looking at myself. I just can't do it. Then there could be physical aspects also. The person may feel very tired, may need assistance. There could be other problems such as weight loss and other symptoms. So all these problems also need to be understood and then supported for. So if somebody has undergone a disfiguring surgery, we need to be compassionate to them that that person may have his or her own, um, uh, challenges because of that treatment that they have undergone or because of the disease that they have undergone. So that's a big problem for them. And the next one is emotional, and emotional part plays a huge role. It is rare for me to meet patients who are completely at peace and completely stable and have absolutely accepted it 100%. This morning, I met up with a lady, she has breast cancer. She actually has a fairly early stage breast cancer, very high chance of cure, but extremely anxious, like anxious to the extent while sitting also, she was literally shaking and talking to me. And she was like completely close. So I spent some time with her. I explained her things. I gave her context. And it's very important that we understand what's happening in the patient's minds. There's fear of death. When you talk about cancer, the first thing that comes to mind of people is, am I going to die? Am I ready to die? What will happen to my children? What will happen to my partner? What will happen to the work that I'm doing? I don't want to die so early. The person may have a completely curable cancer. The person is not going to die, but there's a fear of death, and fear is irrational. You cannot say, why are you fearing? This is nothing. You will get cured. Don't worry. This don't worry part is the most, it's really, uh, it can create even more anger in patients. What do you mean, don't worry? Don't tell patients who have cancer, don't worry. You ask them, what can I do to make you feel better? They're going to worry anyway if they have to. There's also a fear of treatment. The cancer treatments can be quite challenging. The surgeries can be disfiguring. Surgeries can be very extensive. The radiation has its own problems. Chemotherapy has its own problem. Immunotherapy, hormonal therapy, everything comes with difficulties. Now, this happens because cancer, unlike infection, happens in our own body. So infection is something, we talk about COVID now all the time. COVID is a virus which comes from outside, or you get a pneumonia, or you get some other infection. It is coming from outside. There's a virus or bacteria that is entering in your body and creating a havoc. Cancer is your own cells creating havoc, own cells going completely rogue and dividing uncontrollably. So when you try to treat it, you're basically trying to kill your own cells. And that is what creates side effects of the radiation. There is a lot of fear about the recurrences. So the person is getting treated or has finished the treatment, has reasonably curable disease, has no signs of cancer right now, but is continuously living in fear of recurrence. That they're just waiting, oh my God, when is this cancer going to come back? Is it coming back? I just developed a little bit of fever. Is this because of cancer? I develop a bit of cough. Is it because of cancer? And their life is all about, do I have cancer? Do I have cancer? Do I have cancer? And it's just, they're not able to, use their life potential completely. Anger is another common emotion that I see. There's a lot of anger in people. Why is this happening to me? Why to me? I have done everything. It's very common for me to say, I don't even eat non-veg. I don't chew gutka, pan, or I don't drink alcohol. I do yoga every day. I'm so fit. Why is it happening to me? So there's a lot of anger. There could be anxiety about what will happen. I have a patient with me right now. The young fit man is a 35-year-old, very robust man. You met him on the street, you wouldn't even believe that he has cancer. He has a very highly curable laryngeal cancer, throat cancer, 98% chance of cure. He's paralyzed by anxiety, completely paralyzed by anxiety. We tried counseling with him, that's not helping. So we are now, we have referred him to a psychiatrist for starting certain medications to just allay his anxiety. While we believe, most of us believe that, your mind and body and then, are separate, but it doesn't work that way. It's just one machine. Your mind needs to be calm and at peace for your body to function properly. And similarly, the other way around. Mental stability, emotional stability is very, very important for all of us, but also more important for cancer patients, for them to go through these difficult times. Depression is again very common, and we refer these patients to psychiatrists. Depression, anxiety, anger is also very common in caregivers, immediate family members. The other thing which I see sometimes, and it's really distressing to see for me also, is the survivor's guilt. These are patients who have had cancer and then have survived it. They don't have recurrence. And they feel guilty that other people are dying of cancer, but I'm not dying. I had a very strange case, and it was just heartbreaking. Two brothers, both in their late 60s, from Guwahati. Both unfortunately had the same cancer, diagnosed with a gap of literally 15 days from each other. One in curable state, the other one in terminal stage. And the one who was in curable state was inconsolable. Why am I dying while why am I not dying while my older brother is dying? And it was really very difficult to handle that situation. Cancer has a lot of stigma. It was not, it's still very common. People would say, "Arey, kis janam ka paap se hua hai, iske wajah se ye cancer ho gaya mujhe." There's a lot of stigma that you have done something wrong in this life or your past life, if you believe in past life. And that is why you have cancer. You have cancer because it is your mistake, because there is something wrong in you. That is the stigma that is associated. And that leads to people trying to hide that they have cancer. People trying to, and when you try to hide something, when you try to keep something with you and not share it with people, it creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of pressure, and that leads to other problems. It also creates shame. The shame could be because of the disfigurement. So for example, people who have, say, a cancer of the oral cavity, where they have undergone removal of the tongue or part of the face, or breast cancer patient who have undergone removal of the breast, they may feel awkward to go out of the house, go to a restaurant to eat a meal, or go to social occasions, and then they try to sort of limit themselves within the four walls of the house, and that leads to other problems again, such as loneliness and depression. And there's a fear of isolation, that what if people around me don't accept me for who I am? What if they feel awkward around me? What if they don't like me being present at social occasions? And the other and the most distressing again is the fear of pity. It's very common for us to say, "Oh, that's so sad that you have cancer. I'm so sorry to hear you had to undergo this. And that's really bad. I feel bad about your children." While we may say that in full faith and full, good nature, the person who's hearing it will hear it as pity. And nobody likes to get pity. It's not a very nice sensation. So my request is that don't pity somebody who has cancer. Step ahead and ask, "What can I do for you? How can I support you? Is there anything that I can do?" And there's another thing which I see people ask, "Let me know if I can help." It doesn't work that way. Nobody's going to call you when you say, "Let me know if I can help." The right question to ask is, "I want to help. Tell me, how can I help?" Cancer also takes a toll on relationships. Many patients, and especially older women, we see, who would know that they have cancer. There's a breast cancer, there's bleeding from vagina, cervical cancer, or whatever it could be. And they would just not tell anyone, because they don't want to cause inconvenience to their partners or inconvenience to their children. They'll say, "Nahi, why trouble them? They're so busy. I don't want to bother them." There's a guilt for causing inconvenience. Relationships also, cancer can also change the dynamics. The patriarch of the family who was like the head of the family, who's running the whole family, suppose if that individual gets cancer and is very weak now, the dynamics changes. He's not the one who's making the decision. Maybe his children are, maybe his daughters are, and that can create friction. And then there could be difference of opinions. So for example, another really sad story was I had a patient who had terminal cancer, was admitted in the ICU. There's nothing we could do for that individual. He was unfortunately beyond help. But the family was just not willing to write that, let him go. Their stance was, no, you do whatever it takes to save him. You do whatever it takes. And I kept feeling that this is not fitting in. I mean, this man is not going to survive. We are just putting him on ventilator and just pumping air into his chest. For what? I mean, we are just creating so much of distress for this man. And the sad thing, what the family told me, and I can never forget it, is the family said that, he has left crores for us. At least 25 lakh का तो बिल हो जाने दीजिए, लोग क्या बोलेंगे, बाप के लिए कुछ किया नहीं. And I was like, I said, what are you talking about? You're torturing your father just to increase the bill so that people don't feel that you didn't enough for your father. But these are the sort of dynamics that come out, and they impact the decisions that are made. Overprotectiveness of the relatives can also, this is the I must do something for my father, I must do something for my mother. And I ask these relatives, are you doing this for your father or mother, or are you doing this for yourself? Are you doing this so that you don't feel guilty later on that I didn't do enough? And these are difficult discussions, but we need to have these discussions to make sure that the patients don't suffer. There's a lot of impact on the sexual health of the individual also. They could cause impotency, infertility, body image issues. As I mentioned, some parts of the body can change. There's also a bit of drop in the sexual desires, the libido. Many people may have fear of intimacy, that a woman who has undergone breast cancer treatment or a cervical cancer treatment may feel that I'm not sure if my partner feels attracted to me. Or a person who has undergone treatment for, say, oral cancer may feel, I'm not sure if my partner feels any desire for intimacy for me. There could be a bit of shame associated with, and guilt of depriving the partner of intimacy. And here, the important part is for the healthcare professionals to step ahead and counsel them about sexuality and what are the things that they can do and can't do. And I always encourage people to engage with their partners at whatever levels, whether it is discussions, romance, sexuality, whatever they desire. And of course, we guide them that these are the things that you can, these are the things you can't do. Cancer also has a deep impact on career. People lose jobs because of the handicap. You may not be, you may not be able to do the job that you are doing anymore, or you have to take lots of leaves because of the job, because of the cancer, and that may cause loss of job. There could be loss of income, and there could also be an undercurrent of discrimination on the job. Now, this discrimination comes up in very subtle ways. So, for example, you're due for a promotion and you are a performer. You have done your cancer treatment, you're treated, you're cured. But they will say, let's not put pressure on him. He's cancer patient. Let's not promote him now. We'll see later. That's discrimination. The individual deserves it. Individual is fit, but he's going to get discriminated on the job because of the diagnosis that he has. Or, he may be put into certain aspects of the job which are, not really exciting, challenging. People can, in fact, force their employees to leave by putting them on the bench and things like that. So, career management is also an important part when a cancer is diagnosed. Caregivers have their own problems. So, they have to manage the physical and psychological needs of the patients and their own needs. And many a times in India, especially, we see there's a complete lack of open communication. it's not very it's not what very rare. It's every day for me that patient and family comes into the room. We have a discussion. Before they come in, the relatives will come in and say, "Unsko mat batana, usko pata nahi hai kya hai." And then we sort of manage somehow. Then they go out, and then the patient comes in and tells me, you know, wo mere wife ko mat batana kya hai, mujhe batao kya hai. So the person obviously knows that the individual has cancer, the patient himself. Now let me just put it in context. When you are developing fever, like, you know, God forbid, not now because of COVID, but if you do develop fever, most of us know a couple of hours before that we are developing fever. You feel, what we call is, we feel feverish. We know our bodies that something is wrong. When you have something like cancer, most of us know that there is something wrong. But especially in India, there's a circus that goes on. The relatives will not tell the patient that there is something wrong. The patient would not want to tell the relatives there is something wrong, and they don't talk to each other. Both are under severe stress, and both are not talking to each other. And it creates, it makes the stress even worse. It creates a lot of problem. Now doctors, you know, we are supposed to help patients, but relationships with doctors are also causing a lot of stress to family and patients. There's a fear of asking questions. The doctor doesn't have time. The doctor is like, you know, oh, you don't know so much. I can't answer so many questions. And, you know, there are all sorts of doctors. There's a lack of communication between the patient and the doctors regarding outcomes and side effects. So it's not very rare, for example, the patient finishes the treatment and says, oh, why is this happening to me? And the doctor would say, of course this is happening to you. This is because of the treatment. And the patient says, but you didn't tell me that this is going to happen. So for example, what we do in our hospital is we give them like a complete overview of what is going to happen. We give them material to read about what are the side effects and what can they do to overcome those side effects, and how do they escalate, what are the treatments that are required. So it's important that you have a completely open conversation with your doctors about what can happen and what can you do to prevent that, or if it happens, how can you treat it, how can you detect it early. And you know, few years earlier, doctors were gods, right? We treated our doctors like gods, that they know everything and they are going to do everything for us. And now it's a completely reverse relationship. There's complete breakdown of trust. I routinely see patients who would come to me as 5th opinion or 10th opinion because they just don't trust anyone. And I don't blame them. There are lots of problems in the healthcare system that we have, and patients face the brunt of it. So there's a lack of trust. And what do you do in this situation? So I told you earlier that I feel that you should take at least a couple of opinions. Once you have taken the opinions, you find somebody whom you trust. Starting such a important journey of treatment of cancer without trust will be very difficult, and trust is an important part of this treatment. Palliative care is when we cannot cure the cancer, but it's mainly supportive care, and there's a big problem in India about palliative care as well. Our relationship with death is very, very strange. That is the only certainty in our life. We are all going to die. But we just refuse to accept that. There's complete denial of death. There's fear of death. There's denial. There's a lot of anxiety about, you know, death. And some people also have anticipation that, you know, when am I going to die? How am I going to die? What will happen to me? What will happen to me, my property or my kids after that? So there's a lot of, it's a very complex relationship, and it's quite ironic that that is the only certainty in our life. And it's the most complex relationship in our life. It's very common for doctors to say, "Acha, kal se smoking ban kar dena. You cannot chew tobacco now. You cannot drink now." And that's it. Addictions are not habits. Addictions are difficult to get rid of, and we need to counsel and support the patient for de-addiction. And there are specialists for de-addictions also. That's an important part of the conversation, that the family, patient, and the doctors need to have. Oh, this is a more prevalent disease in India than cancer. Unsolicited advice. मेरे चाचा के बेटे के लड़के के नेबर ने ये झाड़ का पत्ता खाया था तो उसका कैंसर ठीक हो गया था, तुम भी खाओ. That is the sort of advice people give. I had one patient who lives near the hospital only. Poor lady, she had cervical cancer, and they belong to a certain what do you call, certain religion or whatever, where everybody is very social. So they started getting lots of people visiting the house, coming and crying. अरे क्या होगा तेरा, अभी तू मर जाएगी तो बच्चे का क्या होगा? And I said, my God, what is happening here? So I actually gave them a letter saying nobody is allowed to meet this patient, and they stuck it outside the house saying the doctor has said no visitors. These sorts of crazy things happen. Alternative therapies is a Pandora's box that I don't want to open, but there's a lot of problem along with that, because people are basically selling hope, and hope is a very important part of our life. But when somebody sells hope, saying it's very common for us to see patients diagnosed in stage 1 or 2, taking alternative therapies, and then coming to us in stage 4. Very, very common, and it's really sad. There's a lot of financial toxicity because of cancer. Treatments are expensive. Most of us don't have health insurance. There's lack of income, and that aspect also needs to be taken care of. So if your friend or family member has cancer, please don't say, "Batana mujhe kuch lagega to." If you can offer financial help, tell them that, if you need money, I can contribute so much. Help them. Spiritually also, it's important to talk about spirituality. What is your belief about life? What do you believe as purpose of your life? What are your beliefs about death? People have very complex beliefs and very different beliefs. What's your relationship with God and religion? So these are aspects also which need to be taken into consideration. Religion, God are sort of intricate parts of our life, which doctors obviously, don't talk about at all. But, as a cancer patient and the family, you need to consider these aspects also. So these are the battles that I've sort of highlighted that the cancer patients go through, cancer patients and their families. The holistic approach to treatment is not, I mentioned, as if, you go to a doctor and you get treatment. No, there are lots of people involved in the treatment of cancer. There are various types of medical specialists, there are physiotherapists, yoga therapists, nutritionists, psychologists, psychiatrists, all sorts of people. Along with that, there are caregivers, influencers, family members, spiritual leaders. Like, for example, there's a particular religion patients that I've seen who insist on getting blessed by their spiritual leaders. So I actually have to write a summary to them, and then they take that summary to them, to the spiritual leader who blesses it. And they believe it, that it's an important part of the treatment for them. They believe that if that happens, then I will get cured of cancer. It's important for them. Of course, you have to look at insurance, sponsors, NGOs. So it's a very complex world of treatment of cancer, and we need to be aware of all these aspects. And this is what I mean by saying you need to go to a center which is able to offer all these therapies to you. It needs to be holistic approach. I want to end my presentation by this picture, and this summarizes what we spoke. This is the Damocles sword. There's a sword continuously hanging with just a horse's hair on the top of our cancer patients and their caregivers. They don't know when it's going to just fall down and kill them. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of uncertainty involved in this. And we need to be appreciative of that and help them accordingly. Thank you very much. So if you have any further questions, of course, we'll take them here, but you can also email them to me and I'll be happy to answer them later on.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. That was a very, very enlightening presentation. And I think what stood out was the role of every one of us in trying to help a person who's unfortunately affected by cancer and how we can make a meaningful impact, however small it might be. So I would believe that we learned so much more today about the psychological aspects of tackling cancer so that it helps us win the battle against cancer. I really appreciate the frank and candid manner in which you presented so many of those thoughts, ideas, and experiences. There are obviously a lot of questions coming up in the chat box. I will take the permission to read out those questions to you so that you can respond to some of them and we can continue our discussions.
Sure.
One of the first questions that has come up is, in the current COVID scenario and the fact that we still don't see too much of respite, is it going to impact the treatment facilities? What's happening around? Can you throw some light on that, please?
It's heartbreaking. It's really very difficult. So the number of patients that we are seeing right now has reduced by 1/4. And this is not because the incidence of cancer has gone down. This is because 3/4 of the patients are not able to reach us. And I'm just fearing what is going to come up after a few months. We are going to see a deluge of patients in really very advanced and incurable stage. There are many problems happening. Financially, people just don't have money for treatment. They cannot travel to the hospital to get the treatment. There is an irrational, rather, no, I would not call it irrational, but there is an intense fear about getting COVID if they go to hospital. People are procrastinating. Recently I started treatment for a young girl, 35-year-old girl, who has rectal cancer. Her symptoms started in January. And she just kept postponing, saying, let's see after lockdown, let's see after lockdown, let's see after lockdown. And then it was August, and now she has a stage 4 rectal cancer. And this is everyday thing for me. We have patients who have started treatment for cancer and then got COVID. I have a young man, unfortunately, he just passed away. Very young man, he was hardly 42, 43, had a recurrent cancer of the cheek. And he was on radiotherapy, developed COVID, then got into ICU and just never came back. So it's been impacting quite significantly on cancer patients. And they have a double blow. There's like cancer to handle, and then there is COVID. It's really bad.
I just remember people often used to refer to cancer as the big C. And now you're talking of the big C plus the bigger C in the form of the COVID
C square
pandemic.
now, not even plus,
yes.
C square.
I realize that it becomes even more traumatic, as you rightly said. Yeah. How helpful would be coaching to help handling the situation? So coaching about cancer and all that you shared, I think was really wisdom for many of us who attended this session. Yeah. Is there some way in which this could be propagated on a larger platform? Are there such activities already happening?
Yeah. So cancer, as I mentioned, that one is cancer creates a lot of mental health issues, and we involve a lot of counselors. So for example, we also have dedicated counselors here, and that is very useful for these patients. But once they are towards the end of the treatment, or once they are completing their treatment and they are looking forward, where do I want to go? How do I get back to my life? How do I sort of settle down again? That's where coaching is important. And I got introduced to coaching a few years ago because I got coached by an excellent coach, and that inspired me. And now I'm actually just about to complete my coaching journey, and my dream is to start a dedicated cancer coaching facility where patients get help in moving forward. It's all about moving forward, getting on with your life, acknowledging what has happened, and then saying, okay, let me now get up and start again. So coaching will play an important aspect. There's hardly any coaching specific to cancer happening across the globe. And in India, it's practically nothing. There's one group that is doing a little bit of cancer coaching, and I have already engaged with them. But, because I bring in that experience, I thought, it would be good thing, or it's a natural thing for me to sort of get into coaching to support my patients.
All right, glad to note that some initiative is being taken in that direction, because I think what we amply understood today, that the psychological treatment of a person who is affected with cancer is as important or even more important than the physical and the medical treatment that capable doctors like you anyway take care of. So I think that coaching dimension which you're talking about is heartening news for India in time to come. Another problem that a lot of us read about is curing cancer can drain my financial resources. How true is this, and how can one really cope up with this kind of a situation?
Yeah, so cancer treatments are expensive, let's face it. And they are also unpredictable, and they also can be recurrent. So for example, somebody may get diagnosed with cancer today and get treated, and then the cancer may recur after 2 years, 3 years, and cause further problems. All the newer drugs that are available, we talk about immunotherapy, targeted therapy, they're pretty expensive. I mean, expensive to the extent it could cost a few lakh per injection. So that expensive. So my advice in this situation would be, first of all, acknowledge the fact that you could get cancer. Everybody is prone to get cancer. Okay. And first get a good insurance cover for you. It is important. Most people feel, "Arey nahi yaar, I'm healthy, I'm so young, nothing is going to happen to me. I will manage. I don't know, insurance companies are a scam," all sorts of things. And I see those people suffer so much because it's very difficult to keep paying through your pocket for all the expenses that you need. So depending on the sort of a paying capacity, or depending on the financial ability of each individual, I would suggest get a good insurance cover for you. And then when you are starting the treatment, it is important that you find a partner who is offering you the best of care at a reasonable price. So as I mentioned, that don't start the treatment right away saying, let's get on with it. Look around, take a couple of opinions, and then find out the right partner for you. Now, there are many pharmaceutical companies who help the patient. So for example, if there's an expensive drug, they will give some offers that if you buy 2 drugs, we'll give 1 free, or 3, whatever it could be. So check with your doctors. How can we reduce the expense? Ask that question. What can we do to reduce those expenses? And the doctors may or may not be able to help you. There are lots of NGOs which are helping patients. So for example, I treat a lot of patients from Sion Hospital. I'm an alumnus at Sion Hospital. I used to be a visiting consultant there until recently. And these are people who are living, in abject poverty. We have patients who, that day one patient had come from Kurla, an unmarried woman who living with her sister. And she said, I don't even have money to go back to Kurla. That sort of a situation. So there are lots of NGOs which are helping. So we've sort of arranged all the funds for them, and we manage the treatment. So ask your doctors, tell them, that we have a problem and can you help us, and check what happens.
Would you also be able to share with us what kind of facilities are available in Mumbai city? Because most people believe that if it's a cancer treatment, one has to go to Tata Memorial Hospital. That's the way one has always understood it. Could you educate all of us a little more on that, please?
Yeah. So Tata is the, the most important guiding star that we have in India. I'm an alumnus of Tata Hospital and a very proud alumnus of Tata Hospital. So definitely for opinion, Tata is the best place to go. For treatment, it is one of the best places to get treated also. But because Tata Hospital is the biggest cancer hospital in India, it is also one of the busiest cancer hospital, and it has its own problems in the sense that there's a lot of waiting, and it can there's a lot of crowd, and especially with COVID, it becomes difficult. And in Mumbai, fortunately, we have very good oncology facilities, and there are lots of oncology facilities coming up also. So when you're looking at taking treatment, you could definitely take opinion from Tata Hospital. You could also, of course, take treatment at Tata Hospital. But if you don't want to, for whatever reason that may be, and you want to go to a private center for treatment, then there are 2, 3 things that you need to look at. One is, does the hospital have all the facilities that are required? So are there various types of doctors, various types of equipment that are required? Two, who are the doctors? Are they trained in oncology, or what is their experience level? So for example, we often see, unfortunately, a gynecologist comes across a breast in the lump and just does some surgery and sends the patients home. Or very common is gynecologist trying to operate on uterus and then finding there is a cancer and then botching up the whole thing. So don't do that. Take opinion, find out what is the capability of your doctor. Your gynecologist may be an excellent gynecologist for gynecological problem, not for oncological problem. So go to the right person at the right place. And we have in Bombay lots of hospitals, starting from the south tip. If I were to count, there's an HCG hospital in Kolaba, then there is Bombay Hospital, then there is Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital in Churni Road, where I work. Then there is Just Look. Then there is now there is Kambala Hill Hospital, is a dedicated cancer hospital called ACI, Asian Cancer Institute. Then you have Hinduja Hospital. Lilavati has some parts of cancer care, not all. Then you have Nanavati, Kokila Bain is very good. Then you have Mira Road has that Wokhad Hospital. It's Wokhad Hospital in South Bombay also. On the central side, you have Fortis Hospital, and Thane has 2, 3 good hospitals like Jupiter Hospital, Lok Hospital, and Harbour side, I think is Tata Hospital also has a New Bombay Center. And then there is the Apollo Hospital in Navi Mumbai is again a very, very good place to get treatment done. So Bombay, we are very lucky that we have lots of hospitals. So a person can take multiple opinions. Look not only at the hospital and the facilities, but what is your wavelength with your doctor? Your doctor, your relationship with your doctor is important. You need to like your doctor. You need to trust your doctor. So meet the doctors, find out what's happening, and then take the treatment.
A lot of people believe that the treatment of cancer is an experience where you go through more turmoil than not actually treating it. Is this true? And could you throw some light on this?
Well, life is a turmoil, and cancer is a part of life. It depends on what stage the cancer is diagnosed at. If you're diagnosed at a stage 1 breast cancer, where the chances of cure are 95%, you might as well get treated. If you get diagnosed with a stage 4 lung cancer, where the chance of survival, the expected survival is 4 to 6 months, you may decide that you don't want to get treated. So there always has to be a balance of risk versus benefit. So it's a good question to ask your doctor that if I take this treatment, what is the risk that I am taking, and what are the benefits that I'm taking, and are my risks higher or my benefits higher? A blanket statement, if I were to make in early stages, yes, I strongly recommend that you should get treated. In late stages, maybe, it really depends on case by case basis. Really depends. Like one of my closest friend has, it's really sad to say that both the closest friends that I have, both their mothers have cancer, and one unfortunately passed away. The other one whose mother has breast cancer, who has brain cancer now, brain tumor now, I've only treated her. She was planned for chemotherapy, and they decided that we don't want to give chemotherapy. We've done surgery, we've done radiation. Now we don't want to put her through chemotherapy. Let's see what happens. It's a fair decision. They have taken an informed decision. They have discussed with me, they have discussed with other doctors, and they have decided that we have done just enough to keep her happy. And she's very happy. She's fit and happy. We see what happens. So it has to be case to case basis.
All right. I think it's a decision the family has to take, as you say, weighing all the pros and cons of it.
Family and patient, more importantly.
Okay. Point noted. Yes. Would you throw some light on what kind of cancer treatment facilities is available in rural India? We always believe that patients rush to metros because they feel there's not enough treatment. Could you throw some light on this dimension, please?
Yeah. So until recently, rural India was a really difficult place for cancer patients. Even today, it continues to be, but things are changing dramatically. Now, what is happening is even the smaller cities, so it started with, say, in Maharashtra, cities like Pune. 10, 15 years ago, Pune started having good hospitals. Then it was Nashik. Then it came to Kolhapur, then Satara, Sangli, Beed, all sorts of places now. Each of the smaller towns, tier 3 towns also in India, have decent cancer centers. Many of their oncologists are trained in Tata Hospital. The number of oncology trainee seats in Tata Hospital has increased. So there are a lot of people who are coming out as trained oncologists, and then they are going to their native places and starting hospitals or starting work there. So that's a very good thing to happen. So things are getting better, but we are far, far, far away from being optimal. It's really very far. So a lot of patients in rural India don't even get diagnosed. We don't even know. So in India, we don't have cancer statistics. There's some statistics, some stats here, some stats there. There's no comprehensive statistical data. And a large number of patients would, Arey buddhi thi mar gayi. That Buddhi Thi Margai may have had breast cancer or cervical cancer, which killed her. Nobody knows. People don't have money. Like, Tata Hospital, when I was working, we used to have lots of poor people coming for treatment. And they would, even today, they sleep on the pavement outside the hospital. These are cancer patients who are begging and getting treated. And then my boss, Dr. JP Agarwal, told me, "Arey, tu pagal hai kya? ये तो वो गांव का सबसे अमीर आदमी है ये." This is the richest of the poor people in that village who had the money to buy a ticket to come to Bombay. He's a rich man in that village. He's living on the footpath now. The really poor of the city, of the villages, are dying without being noticed also. It's a very sad situation, but things are improving and we have a long way to go. And the government is actually taking a lot of steps. Tata Trust is doing a great amount of work in that. They are setting up multiple cancer centers across India. So, we'll see what happens to that.
Good. That's an optimistic statement you made. And the next question is a very interesting one. And I guess this is something which all of us need to listen to your wisdom about. Is there any specific care to be taken while living with cancer patients?
Yeah, so first of all, cancer is not contagious. Okay, so cancer is your own disease. It doesn't spread from one person to another person. Unfortunately, there are people who would say, "Arey, usko cancer hai, to uska, keep their utensils away and, treat them like a leprosy patient." But that's not true. One advice, if I have, how do you treat a cancer patient in the house, is be very kind and compassionate with them. And also be very patient. These are people who are going through lots of fear and, fear of death, fear of treatment and all sorts of things. And they're also going through a lot of physical trauma. There's chemotherapy-induced pain, there's radiation-induced nausea, vomiting, there's surgery-induced, all sorts of things. And they're trying to make sense of what's happening to them. So they may get very angry, they may get very depressed. So be patient with them and be kind to them. Give them more hugs. That's all we need to do.
Great. I think that's very important because unfortunately, I think in our country, there's so much of stigma attached to all these so-called ailments without knowing the complete truth, as they say, half-baked information.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Fernandez, I have unmuted you. You can go ahead.
Doctor, thank you very much for the very, beautiful examples you gave as to cancer. I was only wondering if it is an illness which is quite prevalent. Let's say you start getting some pain in some part of your body. Will you start thinking, "Oh, I've got cancer"? And if so, how can I do a test which will satisfy me that it is not cancer?
Yeah, so diagnosis of cancer can be tricky because, we talk about cancer as one disease. It's not. Cancer is a loosely applied term to hundreds of different diseases, and each of them may manifest in a very different manner. So, for example, breast cancer will have its own symptoms like a lump in the breast, or bleeding, or nipple discharge. A lung cancer will have its own symptoms. It could be pain, it could be cough, it could be blood while coughing. Within that, breast cancers are of different types. There's a lobular carcinoma, there's a ductal carcinoma, there's a hormone receptor positive, hormone negative. So multiple layers and layers of it, and each of them behave differently. Now, if you have a symptom, the first thing that should come to your mind is not cancer. Okay. Like, even again, I'm going back to breast cancer because this happens to be, by the way, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I'm really happy that BMA has organized this talk. So 90 to 95% of breast lumps are benign. They're not cancers. So the first thing that comes to your mind should not be cancer. If there's a symptom that is persisting, my advice is to go to your family physician, get it investigated, get it diagnosed, what exactly is happening, and then see. I also recommend a regular health checks, especially after the age of 35. In 35, I'm saying because we are all in Bombay, we live in this city and we breathe the air that we breathe, and we have the jobs that are extremely stressful. So I recommend 35. After that, we should have regular health checks to detect what's happening. There is no blanket test for cancer. There's no test which says, okay, if this test is positive, I have cancer or I don't have cancer. So you need to be aware. Awareness is, yoga teaches us all about awareness about our mind, awareness about our body. You need to know what's happening inside your body and then reach out for help. So don't look at just one symptom and say, okay, I have cancer. Now, other thing I want to bring about is also, you mentioned about something about, feeling that you have cancer, but the important aspect of why is the cancer incidence increasing so rapidly? The most ignored and the obvious reason which is most ignored is that we are not dying. When we got independence, the average life expectancy in India was around 35 years. It is 67 years now. You run your car for 5 years, it will not give you problem. You run it for 10 years, it's going to cause problems. So one way of looking at it is, okay, we are getting cancer because we are alive. And then there are other reasons like pollution, there's diet, there's lack of exercise, there's tobacco, there's alcohol. There's also better diagnostics that you're able to detect it now. You're not some, old woman who died in the village because nothing got diagnosed. You're able to detect it. And there's also awareness, like this talk, for example, is creating awareness. So people are aware that there's a breast lump, that the woman is going to go to the doctor and say, okay, I want to get it checked. 20 years ago, maybe that was not happening. So there are multiple reasons why the incidence of cancer is also increasing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Indrapalji, I have unmuted you. You can go ahead.
Is there nothing one can do to not get it?
If we want to stay alive, Mr. Indrapal, unfortunately, there is nothing. But when I say that, there are many things that we can do to reduce the chances of we getting cancer. See, now I'm in the hospital. When I go home, my home is just 15 minutes away. I don't even know if I will reach home, whether I'll meet with some accident, right? Life is not predictable. But there are certain things we can do. I'm going to wear a seatbelt. I'm going to drive slow. I'm going to use my brake. I'm going to use the lights. So similarly, to reduce the chances of getting cancer, there are certain things that we can do. And one of the most important thing is our lifestyle. What are we eating? We are what we eat. So a healthy diet, a square diet. So the Indian diet is very complete. It has a good balance of fats, proteins, carbohydrates, fibers, vitamins. So a healthy, balanced diet and healthy body. For a healthy body, you have exercises. Now, when I say exercises, I don't mean that you go into the gym and pump iron. You want to do that, you do that. But maintain a healthy body. Do some stretching exercises. If possible, do yoga. go for a walk, maintain your weight. Your body weight is also very important. Maintain a healthy mind. Have awareness about your body. Say, for example, if somebody has a very high incidence of cancers in their family, then you need to be aware that I may have higher chance of getting cancer. So I may need to go to the doctor more frequently. So awareness about your own risk. If you are a smoker and you develop cough, you need to be aware that I need to go to the doctor early because I may have cancer because of my high risk. So creating that healthy lifestyle with diet, exercise, knowing yourself, know thyself and your own risk are very important. And then regular health checks, as I mentioned.
The gene detection that we read about, that whether you have a cancer gene or not, and those kind of tests are advisable, or that may create a needless fear in the minds and so on.
Yeah, those tests are not advisable for everyone. Those tests are prescribed by the doctors in patients who need it. Like, for example, if there is somebody who has a very strong family history of breast cancers, we advise them a certain test called BRCA test, which tells us, is this individual also prone for cancer? Now, for example, if that individual is, if the lady is BRCA positive, she will have a 70% chance of developing breast cancer and a 50% chance of developing ovarian cancer. The famous example being Angelina Jolie, who did removal of both the breasts, few years ago, and it all became a rage. So it is recommended only if there is there are certain parameters. So in breast cancer family history. So, it needs to be done in coordination with the doctors. There are certain diagnostic, firms which are publishing it like anything every day. There's a full page article about what tests they can do. And I don't recommend that is done. You need to do it in coordination with your physician.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Prasad. There are going to be more questions because I believe there's never an end to learning, but we'll have to come to a pause to today's session. Thank you so much for so patiently answering all the questions, and additionally, removing so many of the biases and wrong ideas and wrong notions that people were having about cancer. Your presentation was brilliant, and I think what was even more engaging was the patient manner in which you could answer all the questions. I have indicated below in the chat box for everybody's benefit, Dr. Prasad Dandekar's website and a contact number. He has already mentioned to you that you can feel free to reach him in case you would like to engage in some discussion at some point in time. On behalf of BMA, I'd like to thank you once again, Dr. Prasad, and of course, our own Shripad, member of our executive committee. Thank you so much for this recommendation. And it was such a serendipity that we were having this session in the Cancer Awareness Month that Dr. Prasad was specifically mentioning about. May I request everybody to put on your videos so that we can have a group photograph as a memory of the time we spent with Dr. Prasad this evening on the BMA platform. Our team from the Secretariat, Lakshmi, Supriya, will do the needful. Today was a record attendance again of 81 people. So we are on 4 screens as per Zoom. So please have some digital patience while we capture this moment that we spent together with all of us. While they are at it, let me tell you that the next 3 weeks, our Wednesday webinar schedule is already on the website. Next week, we have a very interesting presentation by Mr. Naushad Forbes and Farad Forbes, mainly on how to create value by building trust. And this is going to be a wonderful experience sharing on what were the efforts made by the company and their own stakeholders in trying to cope up with the turbulent times today. The week after that is an interesting session on how the export-import trade is being impacted during COVID and post-COVID. This is by the president of Albia, Mr. Jayant Lapsia. And the week after that, we have a presentation by Dabur on their CSR activities by the head of human resources, Mr. Sudhakar. So the next 3 weeks, Wednesdays, are again on different topics where we expect a lot of learning to happen. and we look forward to have many of you present. As usual, we'd like to thank Indrapal Singh ji, Ernest Fernandez ji. They are always regular in this learning journey and keep blessing us as past presidents in the efforts that we are trying to make to enhance the learning process for all our members. I'm waiting for Lakshmi to confirm that everybody whose video was on has been captured in her camera, after which we will end this session for today and look forward to continuing on the learning journey with Bombay Management Association. Thank you, Dr. Prasad, once again.
Thank you very much, Professor Mani and BMA. This was a wonderful session. And I really enjoyed the questions as well. They were very different questions. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Stay safe, everybody, while we move into the unlock, and stay blessed.